Service is going to begin. Mrs. Sydelle P Klein. Officiating our service today will be Rabbi Svi Engel from Or Torah congregation.
We gather today for the Levaya of Sirka Perel Bar Avram Aryeh Halevi. We have a halacha that tells us that we're meant to tear kriya for a parent ad sheyagale et libo, until one reveals the heart. So one of the interpretations of that means that unlike for other family members, when one tears kriya for a parent, Hashem Yirachem, they should dafka tear in public. Other people should see it together. Shouldn't be done b'tzina, but more in a public setting. And given the weather, even though we could do it any time b'sha'at chimum until the end of the burial, normally I do it at the cemetery. Given the weather today, we decided it would be equally appropriate. Sha'at chimum means an emotional time, and this is an emotional time that we gather today to speak a little bit, to offer some milah de hespeda, words of eulogy for this matriarch, not only of a family, but in many respects, I could say personally, I always thought of and still think of her now as a matriarch of our shul, even though she's not decades and decades with our shul. I'll elaborate on that maybe a little bit later this morning. We open with a reading, of course, from Sefer Tehillim. We remind ourselves that as much as we may find ourselves serving as shepherds sometimes of a family or of other people, the Ribbon Shalom is all of our shepherd, and no greater time than this. Mizmor David, Adonai ro'i lo echsar, binodeshe yar b'itzein al memenuchot inahaleini. Nafshi yeshovev, yanchine b'magli tzedek l'man shemo, gam ki elech begeit samavet, lo ira ra ki ata imadi, shivtecha umishantecha hema yinachamuni. Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan, neged tzorarai, dishanta v'shemen roshi kosi revaya, ach tov v'chesed yudefuni kol yemei chayai, v'shav devet Adonai le'orech yamim. To begin the words of eulogy, before any words are spoken from members of the family, we traditionally read the first eulogy delivered in Jewish history for a matriarch. According to the Medrash Tanchuma, it's what Sarah Imenu, when she passed away, had said about her by Avram Avinu there in the street in Hebron, right outside of the Mar Machpelah before the internment. So we always read through, at the moment that someone is going to be interred, we read through the tefillah and the words of tribute known to us as inscribed in the book of Proverbs and Sefer Mishlei as the Eshet Chayil. Eshet Chayil miyimtza v'rachok mipninim michra batach bah leiv ba'ala v'shalal lo yechsar Gemalatu tov v'lo ra kol yemei chayeha darshat tzemer ufishtim v'taz b'chefetz kapea hayeta ka'oniot socher mimerchak tavi lachma v'takom be'od laila v'titen teref leveta v'chok l'naroteha Zamema sadev tikachehu mipri chapea nat akarem chogra beozmot neha v'te'ametz zroteha ta'ama ki tov sachra lo yichbe v'layla neira yadea shilcha v'kishor v'chapea ta'am chufalech kapa parsa le'ani v'yadea shilcha le'evyon Lotira leveta mishaleg ki chol beita lavush shanim ma'revadim asitala sheish v'argama and levusha Nodaba she'arim ba'ala b'shivto im ziknei aretz sadin asita vatimkor v'chagor natna l'kna'ani oz v'hadar levusha v'tischak liyom acharon pi hapatcha v'chochma v'torat chesed al l'shona Sophia halichot beita v'lechem atzut lo tochel kamu v'nei v'yashruha ba'ala v'yihalala rabot banot asu chayil v'at alit al kulana Sheker hachein v'hevel hayofi Isha yirat Adonai hiti talal Tenula mipri yadeha V'halua v'ashe'arim ma'aseha. And with that first eulogy as preamble to set the context for the rest of the milah de hespeda, the words of eulogy that will be offered, we now call upon various members of the family to deliver words of hesped, to translate, as it were, the hesped, the eulogy, words of eulogy for a matriarch into contemporary terms and to relate them directly to our beloved Sydelle of blessed memory. We'll hear first from some grandchildren. Zoe will be reading some words that were written by Molly in Eretz Yisrael. She'll represent Molly reading those. and we'll hear from Jack, Singer, and then the children will speak, Mordechai, Tzvi, Menachem, and Steve and Rebecca. I'd ask them each to come up in sequential order, please.
Good morning. I am reading on behalf of Molly Singer. Okay. My bubby, Sydelle, was a woman of fierce love and even sharper wit. To the community, she was the Rebbitzin, a leader who stood beside my grandpa Sam. To her students, she was a dedicated teacher, but to her family, she was the one who was profoundly invested in every single one of our lives. She was never a distant observer, whether it was her children, her grandchildren, or her great-grandchildren. She knew us, she rooted for us, and she lived for our nachas. So much of that love was felt in her presence. During my childhood, almost every Shabbat, I would have the honor of accompanying my grandmother to shul. I have such fond memories of our Shabbos morning breakfasts of coffee and kichel, the Shabbat lunches spent together, and the simple pleasure of an afternoon chokamoka. Bubby had a gift for storytelling. She kept her parents and her childhood alive for us with stories. She would tell us about her father's store in Williamsburg, her childhood friends, falling in love with Grandpa Sam, and the journey they took together to lead the special Chicago community. She was such a central part of my life. When I was a young child and my grandmother was teaching at Hillel Torah, I used to pretend I struggled with speaking Hebrew just so I'd have an excuse to go visit her during the school day. I just wanted to be in her orbit. We see how this worked out. The joke was on me. As I ended up marrying the love of my life, my husband Elior, who is Moroccan-Israeli, who definitely speaks Hebrew. Remember, this is Molly. This is Molly. Okay. Bubby was a teacher in the classroom, but she was an even greater teacher of life. In these recent years, as Bubby needed more care, I watched my parents embody the true meaning of kibbut av va'em. The way they cared for her with such devotion, patience, and dignity was a masterclass in kavod horim. They didn't just talk about honoring a parent, they lived it every day, making sure she was loved and comfortable until the very end. Jack, Charlie, and I love you both so much for the example you set. And me too. I will always remember her spirit. Bubby knew how to bring joy into the most serious or even so-called regular moments. During Megillah reading, Bubby would use her inhaler as a rashan with a twinkle in her eye, just to make us all laugh. She showed us that a life of mitzvot is also a life of humor and warmth. Beneath the wit, she was our moral compass. She always told her grandchildren, don't do anything you can't tell Bubby. Don't do anything you can't tell me about. That wasn't just a phrase, it was a lesson in integrity. She wanted us to live lives we were proud of, lives that were honest and transparent. She held us to that standard because she believed in us so fiercely. Bubby, you gave us a lifetime of nachas, and the privilege was entirely ours. We were the lucky ones to be your grandchildren. We will try our best to live as a family through your legacy and teach our children one day, Be'ezrat Hashem, how to live through your values of Torah and Midot. We ask for your mechila for any way we may have fallen short in our kavod to you. May your neshama have an aliyah, and may we always live in a way that we'd be proud to tell you about.
So I have a less structured. That was beautiful. Yeah, but Bubby, she was such a strong individual, and I feel like everybody knew that. She had a lot of wit and a lot of love. Something I noticed about her love is it was super intentional. She would tell you, she was like, Jack or Zoe or Zev, I love you. And she would always make it known. It wasn't just like an underlying thing. It was the way she lived. It was for love. And I remember a moment with my Aunt Doris where we went to the lake to go visit and see the lake, and I brought a pair of binoculars, and she was really hard of seeing, but with the binoculars she was able to see the entire city, which who knows the last time she really went to Chicago, but just the joy on her face, being able to experience that with us is just something I'll never forget. And she was never one to complain. I think to all of us, she could be like struggling to breathe in the hospital, and I'll call her and she'll be like, how you doing? How's your job? And I was like, Bubby, I'm calling you to check on how you're doing. But yeah, she always showed so much love, and she was a great teacher, and we miss her very much. And I know that like for years we lost our grandfather, Rabbi Sam Klein, and she always spoke about him and shared stories. And I know that she was probably really excited to one day be back with him. And I know that they're always with us moving forward. And she's in a happy place. So thanks, Bubby. I love you.
As the Bechor, I just want to say a few words. She was always proudly calling me, "This is my Bechor." Mom, I just basically want to say goodbye. You were a great wife, mother, grandmother, great-grandmother. You were strong, bright, funny, deeply caring. Like many of us, I thought you would live on Mea V'Esrim. Sadly, that was not meant to be. I'm grateful that I was able to see you a few weeks before you passed. You were sick, but you were still you. Even in the hospital, you refused to let the nurses lift you from the bed to the chair. You stood up and walked on your own. That strength defined your whole life. You were able to return home, and I returned to mine. You seemed to be doing better, but events turned quickly, and I didn't get the chance to say goodbye in person. After you were gone, your life flashed before my eyes. You heard some stories, but I remember the stories that came to me immediately. I remembered your stories telling us how you met Dad up in the Catskills. I remembered how when we were little, you would also tuck us into bed and say Shema with us, giving us good roots in our Judaism. I remembered how much you loved Yom Tovim, with the possible exception of Pesach. You may have loved it, but boy, did you kasher the house with intensity. We helped, and we recovered around Purim next year. Then somehow Pesach came again. You were a devoted wife to our father, Rabbi Sydelle P Klein, and you supported him fully in what can often feel like a thankless role, speaking as a rabbi's kid. Together, you shielded us from the vicissitudes of the rabbinate and gave us a loving, stable home. You missed Daddy deeply after his passing in 2009, but you persevered. Life was not easy for you. You lost your vision at a young age, and with it, your independence. Later, after Dad passed, you lost even more freedom. Debilitating arthritis caused you constant pain, yet you pushed forward. And even simple tasks like cutting food or walking with bad knees were painful, but you insisted on doing as much as you could yourself, often refusing help. You were also a deeply respected teacher for many years at Hillel Torah. When others thought time had passed you by, you reinvented yourself, working with children with special learning needs and making a real difference in their lives. You and Dad made sure we received strong Jewish educations. You sent us to overnight camp to enrich our summers and give us joy after long, rigorous school years at Maimonides in Boston and later here at Ida Crown. You are a model of chesed. You cared for your mother for many years through illness and decline. You visited her every day in the nursing home, fed her and treated her with dignity even though she could no longer speak or recognize those around her. And you did this every day for 7 years. You showed us what honor and respect truly mean. You are blessed with a loving daughter, Rebecca, who cared for you with devotion, balancing work and life with constant support of her husband, Steve. Thank you both. Her sons, Menachem and Tzvi, though separated from Mom by many miles, would come lend a hand when they could. You had a wonderful family from around the country who have sent condolences. Some have traveled here from the East Coast, and their presence is appreciated. Mom, you have moved on. I hope and know you will be reunited with Dad, watching over us all from above. Love you and goodbye.
I'm just amazed that I'm here. I did not really prepare anything to say, but we all knew this day would come and sort of dreaded it, but put it aside. My mother was one of the wealthiest people in the world. Not wealth that you think, but despite having rheumatic heart disease from a young age and macular degeneration, making her legally blind from a young age. I have no voice. Despite having macular degeneration, severe asthma through all the years, and the medications for her asthma destroyed all her joints. She couldn't move, she couldn't lift her arms, she couldn't see, she couldn't breathe, and she always, I won't say always, 99% of the time found a way to say, I'm blessed with what I have. She'd mention all the kids and the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren, and the life she had with my father, Alav Shalom. Yes, she had her moments where it would get to her, and then Rebecca would bear the brunt of those moments, but they were thankfully few and far between. Rebecca and Steve took amazing care of her, and I thank them for really being here for them. Because as you know, I'm living far away, as are my brothers to a lesser degree. My mother raised us to be Tzioni, to be Zionist, and although she was, I would say, she was not happy that we were so far away, we made Aliyah. She always explained to me that she understood why we did it, and she was proud that we did it. And thank God she was able to come visit us a few times before she became too disabled to fly. My wife and kids, well, my wife Toby really wanted to be here, but the situation in Israel right now is a little bit dicey, and she could not leave her parents and my kids alone. My sons really wanted to come. In fact, a couple of them, as I was scrambling to try to find a flight to get out last night, they actually looked into and almost reserved flights to come, and then common sense settled in and they realized that they couldn't do it. But my kids Av and Abby and Matar and Tamar and Shai and Idan and Netzach, and then the grandchildren, they all knew and loved Bubby, and Bubby had the privilege of meeting 5 out of the 7 of my grandchildren. I'm just the 2 youngest ones, and my kids got together and put together a few words that they wanted me to say, and of course I lost it here for a second. Here we go. So these are my kids. It is a privilege to live in the era of video calls. And for us, most of the time, Bubby was Bubby of video calls. It would start with, "Hi, Bubby, it's me." As she pulls the phone closer to get a better look, and she would answer, "Ooh," insert name here. "How are you? You look so much like Tzvi." We always tell the people that they're adopted, but nobody believes me. When asked how she was doing, it was always, "I'm good, can't complain." We all know she had plenty to complain about, but she didn't want it to affect her. Her mind stayed sharp, always showing true care for us. "How is your lovely wife, and how are the kids? What else is doing?" It was impossible to hang up a call with her. She always wanted to hear more good news, sometimes more than once. And with every call, the question was always, "When are you coming to visit?" She loved our children, and they always seemed to have an incredible effect on her. Anytime we would visit with the kids, regardless of how she was feeling or what memories she was having, she would immediately revert back to the Bubby that we always knew, present, engaged, and full of joy. Forgive us, Bubby, for not coming often enough and for not calling enough. Bubby, you were loving, generous, humorous, and you got the best giggles. We love you deeply and miss you so much. Love the Israel Klein kids. Should be a Militzat Yosher for all of us.
Good morning. I'm Menachem, honorable son, number 3. A lot has been said already. I was warned that we should maybe discuss with each other and make sure we don't repeat anything. Everything that was said, I would like to repeat. It was beautiful, funny and well-spoken, and from the heart. So I will do the same. Just a few words. My mother was more than a mother. She was a mommy, and she will always be my mom. She loved her litter of 4, deeply, unconditionally. She also loved those with whom we have chosen to spend our lives. She adored and admired my father, her husband, Rabbi Samuel Klein, alav shalom, with all her heart. She modeled the commandment, Kivud Av Va'em, after my grandfather, Abraham Lehrer, passed in 1987 or 86. Mom took my grandmother, Molly, into our home where she lived for several years. Then when Grandma Lehrer required nursing care and level of care that we could not provide, my mom spent every afternoon at the nursing home making sure that she was well cared for. Everything my mother did was driven by devotion to her family. But we will all remember her sly sense of humor, her ability to be silly, her infectious laugh. Her whole body would shake with the joy of her laughter. But she was no pushover. She was a strict disciplinarian when she needed to be, like when we were sitting in the back of shul, doing what rabbis' kids do in the back of shul. And she knew how to yell to maximum effect. But she was also a super cool lady. She was married at 24, and growing up in Brooklyn, she had never driven a car. But after she moved to Colorado while my father was in the Army, he taught her how to drive, and she became the anti-woman driver. My mother drove her Chevy Nova like a champ. She donned a sheepskin hat with attached sunglasses to zip around Chicagoland for shopping, working, picking up the kids, and all manner of errands. She was an expert parallel parker. She was also a great planner and manager. On car trips, she would make sure the car was always well stocked. She would turn to the back seat at least 100 times to check if we wanted a fruit, a sandwich, or a drink. At the time, and that kind of made us laugh. We got in trouble for the laughing. At the time, no trip was complete without 2 large thermoses of delicious home-brewed coffee she plied my father with as he drove through the night to keep us safe on the road. She once used decaf coffee. Once again, she was not happy. This concern with our safety motivated her to encourage us to say Tfilat HaDerech every time we went on a trip, a testament to her deep religious heart. She was meticulous about her religious practice. She was dedicated to the concept of Hidur Mitzvah. As a result, her Pesach table was immaculate. She would only use fine china and crystal, never paper. She wouldn't even put a bottle of wine on the table. She opted for beautiful crystal decanters instead. Her tableware was silver, polished lovingly by hand, and her tablecloths were of the finest linen. A true Eshes Chayil. She loved Shabbos. If you called her from Sunday through Tuesday, you were greeted with, "So how was Shabbos?" And if you caught her between Wednesday and Friday, she would ask, "So what are you doing for Shabbos?" She was amazing. In her later years, I would come to visit as frequently as I could. I would tuck her in every night with her 2 teddy bears that I bought for her on prior birthdays. I cherished those moments, helping her into bed, pulling up the covers, setting her pillows, and placing the bears at her side, every time ending with her kissing me and saying, "I loves you." I will miss my mother terribly. I was blessed to spend Shabbat with her last week and to have spoken to her briefly on her last night on earth. She was blessed that her last years were spent in her own home with her senses largely intact. This is a credit to my sister Rebecca, who ran the show here in Skokie and did whatever it took to keep my mother in the best possible place. If anybody is looking for an amazing, capable, efficient manager, check out my sister. I will be forever grateful to her and to her husband Steve for all they did for my mother. This is a very sad day for all of us, and there's solace in thinking about the happy, fulfilling almost 93 years my mother had lived on this earth. We can find comfort knowing that she saw the growth of her family from 10 grandchildren to 10 great-grandchildren, but most importantly, we are happy that she's finally with Sam once again. Thank you.
I just want to say hi to Molly and all the Israel Kleins. We're missing you, and we hope for your we hope for your safety. There's a Turkish proverb. I don't speak Turkish. The Turkish proverb goes, "Ana sabak kazani al." It means, look at the mother, take the daughter. In English parlance, it is, before marrying the daughter, look at the mother. I had no idea what I was getting into when I invited Rebecca to sing in my vocal group in 1992. I made her audition. She did well. I was working as a waiter at the time at the Slice of Life restaurant, Olav Shalom. A few days later, I called her at her parents' house and left a message on their answering machine. I shared how she was being selected among many talented auditionees, that I was offering her a role in the group. I told her when rehearsals would be and next steps. I told her that I couldn't wait to start singing with her. The entire Klein family heard my long-winded message. So did Rabbi Simon and his wife and all of their guests. It was the second day of Rosh Hashanah at the Klein house, a holy day, a Yom Tov. First impressions are always the best. The second came 12 days later when Rebecca invited me to join her family for the first night of Sukkot. It was my first experience eating in the sukkah. We talked about how I was working as a waiter, not religious, applying to medical school. Maybe I would get in. I didn't get in. I had a great time. After I left, Ida Carroll, the late wife of the late Senator Howard Carroll, another Ner Tamid congregant of my in-laws, said, she's going to marry that boy, Sydelle. Over my dead body. My future mother-in-law responded. I have a bad habit of taking on new things without really having a complete understanding of what might be involved. In the early years of our marriage, it seemed that everywhere I turned, every restaurant, every store, every shul event, I met different people going on and on about Mrs. Klein. She taught generations of students. Mrs. Klein was patient with me to a point. Whereas my father-in-law, Shmuel Zichrono Livracha, delighted in explaining, singing, chatting with me, my early experience with Sydelle Klein was a little chilly. First began the lessons. If I went to the store to buy something she needed, she would ask, how much was it? I would say, it's nothing. Don't worry about it. She would say, I'm not worried. Tell me how much I owe you and I will pay you. If someone saw her on the street and said, oh, Sydelle, I think of you all the time, you should come over, she would later quietly say to me and Rebecca, so invite me. Direct. Say what you mean. Actions speak louder than words. That was the first lesson. She was a remarkable teacher. You and your children had the opportunity to spend a precious few years with Mrs. Klein. But I was enrolled in the home study program. Every day, every Shabbos, I was taught by Mrs. Klein and her apprentice, Rebecca. I always imagined that my wife would be someone who smiled at me a lot, laughed at my jokes, pliable, easygoing. I didn't realize I was marrying an extraordinary educator who was raised by an extraordinary educator. And not just that, strong-willed, opinionated, no loss for words, stubborn, musical, a comedian, kind-hearted, principled, beautiful, sensitive, self-conscious, a bas Torah, sharp as a tack, always thinking, a life of service. Since I met my mother-in-law and her apprentice, I never stood a chance of not being her pupil, their pupil, always learning every day. I thank God for the patience they have had with me. I have been quite the project. Of late, my mother-in-law and I found some common ground in Yiddish music. Jewish choirs chop liver only when medicinally required. Then it's okay. Chalishing chocolate babka and any other chocolate. Jojo. I will miss her terribly. But I'll be comforted in the innumerable ways I'll have the opportunity to see the product of her teaching every time I look in the mirror and every moment I spend with Rebecca, and God willing, a lifetime shepping nachas from our straight-talking, smart as a tack, heart of gold kids that are just like her.
Well, Mom, here it is. That which you did not want, a hesped. Daddy got lucky, or so to speak, and died on Rosh Chodesh. You, well, not so lucky. So I guess I'm going to get to tell everyone just how special you were. You were born Circa Peril in New York in 1933, but they all just called you Perila. Your parents, Abby and Molly, were hardworking bedding and furniture store owners. You love to tell how your father started with a push cart and then bought a storefront and worked side by side with your mom. You beamed when you would say that you came from Brooklyn, and even more so when you announced Williamsburg. But you'd never admit that you had an accent. I do, is what you would reply. Beis Yaakov and P.S. whichever, along with your big brother Moish at Tor Vadas, made you basically know the entire world. My kids who attended Binghamton in New York would meet a friend, tell you the name, and you'd be like, oh, I know them from Williamsburg. You had an amazing memory, never forgetting the names or their connections to you. You went to Brooklyn College, studied education, rather than the Juilliard education you recently mentioned to me that your music teacher was pushing for. You love teaching young children from Ramaz to Hillel Torah, and to this day, people stop me in the street to let me know how you were the best kindergarten teacher. You married Daddy after meeting him at a pool, another favorite story of yours, and devoted your life to him, the rabbinate, Torah, and the four of us. You were a very religious woman. And even as your memory was fading, you always said Shema, never forgot to bench, made sure the women were using the correct dishes and sponges, and got anxious about preparing for each upcoming holiday, even though you hadn't prepared for a holiday in years. What will Sukkot and Pesach look like without you at our table? Mommy, we know that the family and Shalom Bayit were everything to you. We will all work hard to stay close to one another, share in the holidays and simchas for years to come. I want to take this opportunity to thank your caregivers who supported us and loved Mom as if she were their own mother. There have been quite a few over these past few years, but TC, Joyce, Gloria, you helped Mom when she was her most fragile. Thank you for your kindness and care. You are all special in your own way, and Mom felt so safe and secure in your care. When Daddy passed, I promised him and you that I would take care of you and everything you would need. I watched as you cared for your mother, and I learned well, along with Steve, who worked just as hard as I did for you, maybe sometimes harder. We made sure you had everything you needed these past 16 and a half years. I want to publicly thank Steve for being the best son-in-law any parent could ask for. Moms love you, and I do too. Mommy, don't worry. You trained me well. We took care of everything. The house is clean and ready for Shiva. All the papers and the clutter have been cleaned away. The linens were washed, the beds are made, and the garbage and the dishes are not in the sink. They've all been cleared away. But your memory will never be. I love you, Mommy. You will be missed and never forgotten.
Sydelle was born on the 4th of April, 1933. It corresponded, as we looked up last night, to the 12th day of Nisan, Tov Reish Tzadi Gimel. And that was Shabbat HaGadol. And I note that A number of the children mentioned Pesach, the holiday of Pesach. And we're actually now in the Parshiot HaShavua learning all about Pesach. I discovered only yesterday in the hospital that Sydelle Alei Hashem was a Bat Levi. And for those who know how the Parshiot go, the Bat Levi has a very important role to play as a matriarch, a descendant of actual matriarchs Abraham, matriarchs Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, and patriarchs Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, but so named as a Bat Levi. Sarah Perel, who took on the name Sarah Penina, Hebraicized, who went to a camp where she learned Hebrew, that she, of course, had as well from her home and as in school. But and she became a person who raised up, as was said, generations in education. The beginning of this week's Parashat Shavua, we always orient ourselves to the time that we live in, and that time is always framed by the Parashat Shavua, the Torah portion that we read. The Torah says, "Va'ira el Avraham, el Yitzchak, ve'el Yaakov." God tells Moshe, I showed myself to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Rashi, the great commentator, fills in two simple words, seemingly superfluous words. El ha'avot. Well, yes, I showed myself to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov means the patriarchs. But Rashi wants to highlight, underscore, emphasize, point to El ha'avot, al Avraham, El Yitzchak, ve'el Yaakov. As we learned last week in Parshat Shmot, and we'll learn again in this week's Parsha, Rashi will put his finger on it, as it were. There are patriarchs and matriarchs who are more imminent than the patriarchs and the matriarchs we read about in the Bible. And to me, Sydelle was one of those people in our community. How did it go in the Medrash? Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu Moshe, the Holy One, blessed be He, said to Moshe in this week's Parsha, Chaval al da'avdin v'lo mishtakhin. Woe for those who are lost and who are no longer found. Our sages teach us that we were redeemed from Egypt because of the Nashim Tzidkaniot, the righteous women. It is in their merit. Sydelle built a beautiful family. My conversations with her, how many times did she want to tell me all about various family members? It's true in the later years there was a bit of a circuitous way in which she would tell me those stories, but she was always keen on talking to me about them. A theme that came up over and over and over again, and particularly as the macular degeneration got worse, was the lament in person and especially on the phone on Fridays. How will I daven? How will I see the words in the Siddur? That's what she thought about. That's what she saw and wanted to see. My last conversation with her, she was still saying to me, Rabbi, in a New York accent, I hope to come back to shul very soon. Say, Sydelle, we're keeping a place for you, don't worry. This past Yom Noraim, she made it to shul. What schar halicha, as the Chachamim say, what great reward for the effort it must have taken for to be there. I think it was this year just now, one of the days of Rosh Hashanah, I was in the house after davening, blowing shofar for her. It was this year, yeah, I'm losing time myself. And this past Friday night, as Steve and I walked home from shul, I so regret what happened as we passed on Sugarloaf Lane, the house. And Steve peeled off. He said, oh, are you going for dinner at your mother-in-law? I said, no, I'm just going in to say Kiddush. I'm just going in to say Kiddush. That was a beautiful hesped you gave, Steve. But that you recited the Kiddush for your mother-in-law on Friday nights. Zeichel Yetziat Mitzrayim. What she did for you, but what you did for her as family. And one other thing, speaking of schar halicha, Sydelle chose a life together with her late beloved husband, Rabbi Samuel Klein, Zichron Livracha, who I was zocha to know, a life of service to the Jewish people. From the U.S. Army Fort Carson in Colorado Springs, the Temple Shalom in Salem, Massachusetts, the Temple Israel in Philadelphia, the Temple Shalom in Medford, Massachusetts, the chaplain at Mass General Hospital, and then since 1973, decades of service at Congregation Ner Tamid right here in Chicago. They shared not only travels of the rabbinate, but the travails of the rabbinate. And for those who are members of rabbinic families, or children of rabbis, or the spouses of rabbis, you know exactly what that means. And she did it with aplomb and finesse, incredible grace and charm. And I can say proudly, I was zocha to know her. And even more, zocha to be her rabbi for just a few years now. And those times that I spent in the house with Rabbi Samuel, Zichrono Livracha, learning with him, learning from him, really, and right up to the end in the hospital was the winter of 2009, and how much she deeply, deeply missed him, how much they were partners. We remember today her beloved parents, as was mentioned, Molly and Abi Lehrer, blessed memory, brother Moish. Beloved Rabbi Samuel Klein, it's customary to mention the name when we can, Harav Shmuel Ben Zev, Zichrono Livracha. And we offer our condolences together to the many great-grandchildren and to the grandchildren, Av and Abby, Zoe and Miles, Zev, Matar and Tamar, Talia and Daniel, Idan and Shai, Molly and Elior, Netzach, Jack and Charlie, and the beloved children who have been here so often on visits. Just, it was last Friday, the 2nd, I think, when I spoke to Menachem on the phone, and just right after that, on Sunday, when I spoke to Tzvi. But another matter, I'm just talking about, when's your next trip? So condolences to Mordechai and Doris, to Tzvi and Toby, Menachem and Andrea, Rebecca and Steve, to Heinash Tzura B'Tzora Chaim. As we say the memorial prayer now, Lili Nishmat, Sirka Perel, Bat Avram Aryeh Halevi, we think about this august Bat Levi, and we point to a person who is in our community who is truly among the Imahot, B'Tfila, B'Binyan Mishpacha, and especially of service to Klal Yisrael, raising generations of children from the Gan, the kindergarten, the Gan, the garden where the children are grown, to themselves build the next generations of Klal Yisrael. Please rise now as we recite the Kelmale prayer, L'Ilui Nishmata, Hei Nishmata Tzura B'Tzora Chaim. El Malei Rachamim Sochein B'Amrumim Hamitzei Menucha Nechona Tachar Kanfei HaShechina B'Ma'alot Kedoshim U'Tehorim Kezor Akia Mazirim Lenishmat Sirka Perel Bat Avram Aryeh Halevi She'alcha Le'olama Ba'avur She'tein tzedakah be'azkarat nishmata Began Eden Tei Menuchata Lachein Balarachamim Yastir B'Sidr Knafav Le'olamim V'yitzror Chayim Bet Nishmatah Adonai Hu Nachlatah V'tanuach B'Shalom Mishkavah V'nomar Amen.
Thank you. This concludes our service here in the chapel. The interment will take place immediately at the family plots at Shalom Memorial Cemetery, 1700 West Rand Road in Arlington Heights. Shiva today will be at begin today at the Klein residence, 3845 Sugarloaf Lane. That's in Skokie. This afternoon at 4:30. Regularly, Shacharis will be at 6:30 a.m. The Shiva coordinators are located on your information. They're also available on our website. Please text them only. Please note also that Shiva will take place in Dallas at the Mordechai Klein residence, 6042 Steamboat Drive in Dallas from Sunday evening until Tuesday morning. Memorial contributions could be made to congregation or Torah, and that information is also located on our website and also on your folders. For those of you who are going to be going in procession with the family to the cemetery, please make sure you obtain an orange funeral safety sticker. That sticker should be placed in the front passenger side of your windshield. We would also ask that you have your bright headlights and flashing hazard lights on at all times. For an additional measure of safety, our staff will be placing magnetic flags throughout the procession. As we drive in procession today, please drive as closely as safety permits to the vehicle in front of you. This is especially true as we move through intersections. We want to avoid any large gaps in the procession. At this time, I'm going to invite the pallbearers. I'm going to ask everyone to rise as Mrs. Klein is escorted from the chapel. Pallbearers: Paul Laird, David Laird, Steve Singer, Zev Klein, Daniel Trubnick, Jack Singer, and Charlotte Singer.